na-azị obodo ndị Igbo na-eme ọfụma ndị Igbo nọ n'ime afịa ndị Igbo na diaspora ndị Igbo na entertainment ndị Igbo na gọọmenti anyị na-eme ife siri ike anyị na-eme ife kalaka anywhere you enter we dey there. I waka I never see beautiful people Wamaka Abumoni Ifuzamu Bonubu Onibo Nakanafu Onibo Wamaka Wamaka. If you see me call me Onibo Nakanafu Onibo Wamaka.
Ejima Fandi Center for Memories, Nanabata Onyobana, Nobasitata. So, like we all know, the Center for Memories is an Igbo project conceived to serve as a repository of the history, culture, and identity of Igbo. Since its founding in December 2017, the center is repeatedly establishing itself as a leading hub for Igbo cultural and artistic excellence. So by December of this year, the center would mark its 50th year of existence. The center. Okay, so now to Fuyoge, I would like to invite Chief Ben Itiaba to come and give his welcome remarks. So thank you.
I'm so delighted to be back to this stage. Just a few years after being chairman here, a few years after having the privilege of attracting the great brand Nkátá to Enugu Sports Club, 1929. After the COVID months, we all thought it was going to be over. Little did we know that something was cooking. And so this evening, after so many months away, so many months of COVID break and all manner of breaks, Nanaude is back to Enugu Sports Club this evening. Patrick Okibo, who is not here this evening, is being represented because we're all here. We all incubated this idea a few years ago. Ndị be anyị, ife anyị chọrọ ka ọ dịrị ala Igbo mma maka na onye ajụ ada ajụ onwe ya. When I look around as well, I am happy to see a few friends like Dr. Ben Odo from everybody who is here. So happy you're still keeping faith. So happy that you're still interested in issues affecting the Igbo nation. This evening, we welcome a great lady who will speak to us. I'm not to know at this stage if she'll be addressing us in English or in Igbo. Manu munnem nkobna asuna ife demba wo naino ife odewu. Ife demba wo naiwu ife aba ndeba anyi ulo. Ife demba wo naimwa na nkata umibe courtesy of Center for Memories, a global brand now. And as such, now well, a global audience. Some of the people who will be interested in what's going on here this evening may not readily understand Igbo. It doesn't make me happy to say this, but in a global environment, it is very easy to understand why some of the proceedings here will be in English, without apologies. And like I said, let us discuss issues that will help us to move from where we are to where we should be. And so, without much ado, it is my honor, on behalf of the incumbent chairman of Enugu Sports Club, to welcome all of you to this hall, the Right Honorable Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi Hall, auditorium in Enugu Sports Club. And just to say, Nkátá is finally back Down.
We are back. Nkátá Umuibe is back. The conversation continues. May 2018, Kanyi Suko na this same hall and fired the first shot na Nkátá Umuibe. If I did tinye bụ na anyị kwuru na oge erugo mgbe ndị be anyị ga na-anọkọta ọnụ otu anyị si nọdụ ugbu a kpaa ihe dịrị anyị ihe gbasara our culture, our values, our language, our history, and all the dimensions that as it affects both Ali Igbo and Ndi Igbo. And you'll all agree with me that there is no better time to restart Nkátá Umuibe than now. And so, because of COVID, we stopped. But even when we stopped, we knew that we were missing something. On behalf of the Board of Center for Memories, I want to appreciate every single one of you that kept faith with us, that kept urging us, reminding us that this mandate that we have undertaken for Ndebanye must continue. And we are here to tell you that we are back and we are not stopping again. In May 2018, we had Professor Cheluchi Onyemelukwe, who delivered the first Nkátá Umuibe, and his topic was Igbo Ebunye, Lessons from Post-War Recovery in Southeast Nigeria. The next month in June, we had Professor Ndibe, and his topic was Echidime, Ndi Igbo, and the Parable of the Snail. After him, in July, we had Dr. Cheluchi MNI, and he chose the topic, Ejindu Emegene, Foundations of an Igbo Rebirth. Then your joy, in August, we had the erudite D.K. Chukwumerije, and he spoke on Jidofo, Politics of Conscience and Ideology. Then, after D.K., the then President General of Ohaneze Ndi Igbo, Chief Nniangodo, stood on this same podium to address us on Ifeji Malu Igbo. The next month, October 2018, we had our very first female speaker, Chika Odua, and her topic was Nkiruka Azubuike. The future is supreme, but there is strength in the past. Having opened the floodgate for our female superstars, the next month we had Yvonne Choman Banefu. And the topic she addressed us on was Gidi Bubueze, there is strength in numbers. In December 2018, Dr. Chuba Keshi spoke on Gedondianibo, Inquest into Igbo Identity. We normally don't hold Nkátá in January because on Nadia Anabata in the Christmas. So February 2019, Chinenyemba Uzuku came to address us Onyekwe Chiekwe, Ndi Igbo in the digital economy. After Chinenye, Ike Chioke came to address us on Mkporo Reinventing Enterprise na Igbo. April 2019, Dr. Joaba Ohanweze, Governance Matters. May 2019, Ferdinand Ago Nkemjika, Harnessing Our Human Capital. June 2019, Dr. Chichi Anyagolokoye, Njikoka, Rebuilding Resilient Igbo Families for the 21st Century. July 2019, Frank Nweke II, Makoganiru, Igbo Renaissance and the Leadership Question. August 2019, we invited our brother, Philip Effiong Jr. How many people were here when Philip came? Iku Kanane, Post-Biafra Healing and Reclaiming Our Shared Ties. The next month, Dr. Chiko Ihekwazo, Akon Uche, The Education Delusion. October 2019, Mrs. Uchenna Onwame Bubu, Ozuzu na nhazi ndị echi ga-adị n'aka, mentoring our youth to greatness. November 2019, Professor Cheluchi Onyemelukwe, Amamihe, owning and controlling our narrative. In December 2019, we had Chidi Ajaere, Ahamefuna, passing the baton for posterity. Again, we couldn't hold it in January 2020 because of our January effect. So February, we had King Sidesi, Akurul of building a startup nation. And then in March 2020, our chairman emeritus, Chief Ben Etiaba, Ijelu Obodozi, paradigm of servant leadership. And we'll have that servant leadership one day. So after that, COVID came and chased us all into our homes, and we could not continue with Nkátá. We tried, should we do virtual? Should we do hybrid? There was an overwhelming demand, Kaimeya virtual, but we all know that one significant aspect of Nkátá is the interaction we have physical when we are here, which you cannot get in a virtual event. So with that, and we had a lot of big speakers, especially Ndibanye Nonobodo Igbo, had confirmed that they can address us virtual. A lot. If I mention the names, you'll be surprised. Ndi Igbo, Nonobodo Igbo. But we did not want to dilute the import and the impact of the physical interactions we get from here. So we kept hoping that COVID will be behind us. In December, it appeared that we had dodged the bullets of COVID, and so we attempted to restart. And we invited Professor Osito Ubu, OON, and he addressed us on Oganiru Bontuare, development as attitude. By January, COVID came with a deadly effect. We lost a lot of top Igbo leaders in that January. Professor Ebero Omudiwe, Chief Oscar Omudiwe, Rear Admiral Ndubisi Kano, a lot of Igbo leaders. So we just decided to lie low and wait again. And so we have waited, and now we are back. And there is no stopping us. And in coming back, we also decided to look at the way we have been doing it and see if there are things we can do better. One, we decided that going forward, we will be more deliberate and more intentional in getting our young people involved. And you will soon see how that will happen in delivering today's event and going forward. Two, we also said going forward, we will use Nkátá to celebrate our women. The list I counted, we have 22 speakers, out of which we have added about 4 of our female superstars. Going forward, it will be the other way around. You will struggle to find the men. We want to show everyone that Ayinwe, Umwanye, Karakadani, and Unugafu, one of them today. Unakugafu already, Professor Cheluchi Onyemelukwe. She's a lawyer, academic, and writer. She's one of the leading, and when I say so, take it from me, she's one of the leading health lawyers in Nigeria, and runs an advisory firm, Health, Ethics, and Law Consulting, as the managing partner, and they provide cutting-edge advisory on a wide range of legal, regulatory, and policy issues in life sciences, health, gender, social, and development sector. She is also the founder of CHELD, a think tank and advocacy group on health policy that does a lot of work on gender-based violence, mental health, nutrition, migration, nationally and internationally. Our sister is also a professor at Babcock University School of Law. She has worked extensively in the social sector on health systems, law, and policy. She has advised on health sector reform in Nigeria and across the world. She has advised on the National Health Insurance Scheme. She has supported the development and operationalization of the National Health Insurance laws of several states. She has provided technical support on national policies as the National Health Policy, such as the National Health Policy, National Diaspora Policy, the National Policy on Elimination of Female Genital Mutilation, and has provided advisory on state policies like Lagos State Youth Policy. She consults for international development organizations like the World Bank, African Union Commission, World Health Organization, International Organization of Migration, United Nations Fund for Population Agency, United Nations Women, Save the Children, Commonwealth Foundation, UK Aid, USAID funded projects such as Farmer Access, Girl Effect, RTI, Resolve to Save Lives, British Council. Her public health law work includes regulatory support for Nigeria during this COVID. And it was difficult to get her during this COVID because of the work she was doing. Let me even say that when we toyed with the idea of resuming during COVID, we approached her. She was supposed to speak in June 2020, but we wanted to actually defy COVID. We wanted to speak on COVID, pandemics, and Alibu, but COVID overwhelmed us. She has worked for or in countries like Canada, Guyana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Gambia, and her capacity building work includes training for lawyers, health professionals, legislators, and judges. Can you imagine being an expert in both health and law? A global expert on health and law. She was a Killam Scholar and a Canadian Institute of Health Research. Her doctoral thesis, this is one of the best parts, her doctoral thesis was nominated for a university award for the best thesis. And you guys know that celebrate our women. She is the author of Health Research Governance in Africa, Law, Ethics and Regulation. She's a member of Nigeria's National Health Research Ethics Committee. But outside of law, I've been talking about law and health. Outside of law, Cheluchi is a novelist and essayist. We just witnessed her book signing. Her book, The Son of the House, is an award-winning book. She has won several prizes and awards: International Fiction Book Award 2019, SBIF, Spring NG Women Authors Prize 2020, and finalist for Canada's most prestigious literary award. But above all, Cheluchi is the winner of the Nigeria Prize for Literature 2021. Biko, unu na-akụ aka ka anyị kpọpụta nwanne anyị nwanyị, ada anyị nwanyị, Professor Cheluchi Onyemelukwe.
Let me introduce. I almost started clapping. I go see the thing. I say, hey, Unyenka. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. I hope my computer doesn't disappoint me, but let me start by saying that we had talked about this, like Nana mentioned, in 2020. And what he didn't say was that I was quite shaky because, I'd seen the people that presented before, and I have a lot of respect for this platform. I think it's something that is extraordinarily needed. And I know that, in terms of speaking, sometimes, but truly, I need a platform like this. I need a platform ebe anyị nwere ike ịkpa nkata ọfụma. Onye ọbụla ekwu okwu o si wee dị ndị nwere akọ na uche nwee ife ndị oyibo ga-akpọ insight. Enwee ike nye anyị different perspectives. I see n'ụzọ dị iche iche nebanye ife anya. So ka ọ gwa m 2020 na ngabe okwu I was like, in fact, when he called me back in this last year, I said, no, how am I going to do that? I mean, this is such a huge platform. This is such a portentous time. This is such a significant time in the life of Umuibu. I'm the right person here. But that being said, I will try my best. I think it is on Nkátá. Nkátá is really a conversation. It's not really us talking at each other. Ajomia kanya na ba ka anasu Igbo ka anasu n'Oyibo. Osina na asu n'Oyibo. So my speech is going to be in English. One of my hopes for this platform is that eventually we will get to that point where, Igbo language becomes, exciting and people want to learn it. And we have it on Duolingo, and children that are learning Mandarin and all those things will also start learning Igbo. As I tell people, I mean, when I finished my book and everything, and my husband read, the first thing he said was, hey, but as we have seen, I mean, I posted today, even in Canada, it's been celebrated all over the place. And there are so many, for those of us who have bought the book or who have signed the book for today, you'll see that there are quite a number of Igbo words. And people will write to me from Canadian universities, from universities across the world, and they will end with Jisike and other things. If I go to now, so I know that one day we will get there. So it will be working. Let me also say before I go into what I'm going to say, and like I said, this is a big platform. I want us to look at it as such. I think it is fantastic and phenomenal and inspirational that people thought about this idea and are putting their resources behind making it happen. And so I want to thank the conveners of Nkátá and the Center for Memories for all of the work that they're doing and for not giving up, even though I'm sure there are many challenges along the way. Thank you very much, Chief Itiaba. It's such a pleasure meeting you in person. We're friends on social media and so on, and I really followed your campaign when you campaigned. And some of the things that you spoke to are some of the things that I'm going to be speaking to this evening. But bottom line, I need the and that's, we're going to do it together. Okay. My topic is Ahamefuna, Reaffirming the Igbo Identity in Challenging Times. Again, very interesting story about this topic. We did back and forth trying to get a topic. And eventually we settled on Ahamefuna, which is, when you read my book, you'll see that it actually is a central piece in my book. And I thought, so, okay, this is fantastic. Months before. But as the time was coming close, I said to myself, we are going to have to say something. I started looking at the topic and I realized it was a very heavy topic, especially when you look at the sub parts of it, reaffirming the Igbo identity in challenging times. And I started to ask myself, what do I even know about the Igbo identity? I mentioned it to my dad, and he asked what the topic was, and I mentioned it to him, and he said, that's a very serious topic, which did not help my anxiety levels. But like I said, this is a conversation. So what I am doing basically is starting the conversation, and my hope is that we will take it forward. Okay, we've been introduced to myself in some ways, but I'll tell you a little bit of a background about myself to start off. I grew up in Enugu, so this is a homecoming. My parents still live in Enugu. My mother is from Enugu State, so this is really home in many ways, and so on. When I was growing up, my father would go to work. This was in the early 80s. He would go to work. He was a civil servant at that time. He would go to work in different ministries that he was working, and he would be wearing what he would call chieftaincy. It's interesting to see how the world changes, because at that time, most of the people that we knew would wear suits, and ties and all of that. He had just returned from America, having finished his doctorate degree and all of that, and people were expecting him to look a certain way. And he would wear his chieftaincy with his also hat, the red hat, and nyalaka as the coral beads, and go to work in that, which was quite, it was fascinating. Fast forward to today, when I look around, most of the guys are wearing chieftaincy, as we would say. He would go to work and then he will come back. He will pack his 504 and he will come out and he will dig into his suitcase, his briefcase, and bring out Oja. He will be outside, he will play the flute and call us by our names, and we would come out, one by one. And sometimes we wouldn't know which was which. And he would say, no, you have to listen to the tonality. You have to listen to, we would, during the holidays, these days, many of us will go, we'll go to Europe and other places. We would go to my grandmother's place, and so on and so forth. So in all of these things, in all of these experiences, and of course, so many things that I could say. My father was the chairman of his age grade. We were carried along with all those things. We needed to go, we'll go to we'll go to meet people who were bereaved, and he would take us, show us, we would write names and so on. And in all of these things, we were conversing and talking about different things that made us Igbo, that made us, that centered us. When we would discuss it, we wouldn't talk about it as being Igbo, but it was just a given. It was a given. You're going back to school, you're told, that we're a certain way. We behave a certain way. You have to carry yourself a certain way. Ada anyade isuri, ndi gbade isuri, ndi gbade emerutu and. And so, in essence, it seemed to me at the time, when looking back today, I realized that we were being steeped. We were being soaked like, tea bags in water, in the culture, in the customs, but most importantly, in the values of Igbo. What it means to be an Igbo person. I would remember, for example, that we would be going to church around All Saints. Some of us would know All Saints here. And we would see people begging, people from other parts of Nigeria. And you would hear people say, no, Igbo people, that's the one thing that we don't do. If we're able-bodied, we work. It was just a given. That's not to say that we're not generous. It was just to assume that we understood that hard work is part of being an Igbo person. So basically, I think that what I'm going to try to do in my speech is to remind us of some things that make us distinctive as a nation, as a people. To remind us, because sometimes there are things that we see today and we realize that maybe we have forgotten. And maybe if we're younger, we never knew. But it's important that we begin to look at ourselves a little bit differently and ask ourselves if we are really portraying who we are. Okay, so having made that brief introduction, let me just go in. I promised Nana that I'll speak extempore, but in a bit not to forget some things I want to say, I'm going to do a mixture of both things. Okay, so with all that I have said, it seems to me that we have always had a certain set of core values. A few have moved and shifted over time, as these things do, but a few remain the same. And one of the things I did in preparing for this was to spend a little time talking to people, especially older people, but also spend a little time in philosophical books of Igbo people, written over a period of time. And in doing that, I was able to collate a few values that have remained in place. How did I know that they've remained in place? Because when I compare what I'm reading from historical literature and what older people are telling me, and what a few young people have told me, I realize that these values have remained in place. Today, we face different challenges. I won't go into a ton of detail about the challenge because we're living it and we know. From security challenges to finding a foothold, a firm foothold within our own country, to even navigating differences in terms of how we want to approach the challenges that we face. Sometimes when I hear some stories or read the news or scroll through social media, it seems to me that we are asking ourselves, who are we today? My argument to you today is that if we lean on the positive values that I'm going to itemize to us in a little while, that we have developed as a people, if we remind ourselves in meaningful ways, we will yet survive and we will yet triumph. So I've listed 8 main values that I have distilled from this research that I told you that I did. The idea is not that they are exhaustive by any means, right? The idea is that we can build on this, but these I'm sure we can all agree on. The first is self-respect. The second is resilience, or what I call ntachi. The third is republicanism. The fourth is entrepreneurialism and achievementalism, and I'll tell you why I call them that. The fourth is community and the spirit of akuluelno. The fifth is nimbleness, or what I want to call oru. The sixth is nlote, ncheta, or storytelling. And finally, egwuchukwu. Onwezi nke na-etinyere you date when they call you for Nkátá the next time you present it. So, let me start with self-respect. In many ways, ndị Igbo believe in ịkwanyere onwe mmadụ ugwu. Literally, a person according themselves respect and dignity. And it can be manifested in different ways. One of the ways this always came up when I was young, when I was a child, was doing for yourself what you can. Being self-reliant. Being able to stand on your own 2 feet. Not going and borrowing if you can help it. And certainly not going and begging if you could help it. Again, you know, some of those examples I gave before, I mentioned before would come to mind. You would hear us say things like, begging is not an Igbo culture. But did that mean that we didn't help each other? No. But the assumption was that you will first of all, always and always, try to help yourself. Try to do what others are doing when they are doing it. That being, all those things being positive and not negative. When we think about our survival after the war, part of it stems from this idea that as a people who honor themselves, who respect themselves, we will do what we needed to do to survive with honor, with moving forward. The result is there for all to see today. Closely linked with this is resilience, that is itachiobi, being able to bear up under strain without it showing on our face more than is necessary. This has been critical to our survival as a nation. From the times of Ekumeku, and I'm sure some of us know what I mean when I say Ekumeku, to the Civil War, and in the aftermath, resilience has been the watchword of Ndibo. If you type in Igbo and type in resilience, you will see so many articles, so many treatises, so many dissertations that have been written on that, which tells you something, that it is something that we hold dear. And I think that in a challenging time, there is no better value to hold on to than resilience. We get on with life. We triumph. Perhaps in another forum, I'll talk about what this has cost us and how we also need to think about the cost. But that's not for today. Today, let me focus on the core idea of resilience. There are several touchstones for this value, but you will agree with me that the most important, of course, is the Biafran Civil War. We, with our neighbors and allies, survived a civil war that raged for 2.5 years in spite of the aggravation, devastation, and the decimation of our population with over 3 million deaths. People started life afresh with 20 pounds. That is if you got it, because not everybody got it. Okay? But it was never in contention that we would survive, that we would go on. For those of us that did not see the war, and I know that many of us are in the room, and that includes myself, we have benefited from the values of resilience and Itachi. So what it means is that we have to continue to work at this, at developing ourselves and not crumbling in the face of challenges. Resilience obviously does not mean for us as an Igbo nation standing still. It means going on. It means striving despite the odds. To understand my meaning, think of what the aftermath of the war must have been like. Many dead, many missing, many hungry, no work, few markets, abandoned schooling, lost scholarships, lost work opportunities, quiet, silence, policies that, in retrospect, were not in our best interest. And I'm not just talking about the 20 pounds. You're looking at things like the indigenization policy when we were all just struggling. What it meant was that we were not able to buy up bits and pieces that were being indigenized at that time. But look at where we are years after. Thriving markets, schools, all kinds of industry, including music industries. Perhaps not as much as we want or need, but 1,000,000 times better than we could have imagined 50 years ago. Connected with self-respect and resilience is what I choose to call nimbleness or resourcefulness, or what we might call ulu or uru, depending on Ebonyi's. Ulu keji binamba, that's an Igbo proverb. It basically means people will think about it in terms of cunning. I think about it in terms of resourcefulness, in terms of looking around at your environment and being able to decipher what to do, how to behave, how to go on and how to move forward. We have thrived in strange lands with others outside the Igbo by being resourceful, by thinking ahead, sometimes by making mistakes, but always picking ourselves up. In the current times, when some might consider the political atmosphere to be less than favorable, it is still these three things that I think that we need to consider very carefully: self-respect, resilience, and resourcefulness. Another value that has always held paramount is republicanism, which Igbo political philosophers might translate as Igbo Enweze. By this I mean the ability to think for oneself, to have an independent mind, sometimes different from the group. As much as we're a communal people, and I'm going to talk about communalism in a bit, we are also a people who believe that it is good for one to have a mind of their own and to express it without fear, especially within the community. Sometimes I come across comments on social media where we as Igbo people have resorted to name-calling and to silencing others who think different about how we should move forward as a people. Remember our loud Umunna meetings. With disagreements and contentions, people are allowed to speak their minds. We have never been a people to be dictated to be cowed. Instead, we have allowed reasonable dissension, and we have learned from them. Where we have failed to do this, we have often ruled it. So there must be room for us within our communities to listen to each other, to not be afraid to make reasonable suggestions about how we move forward within the polity in which we find ourselves. If we find people threatening violence and threatening other kinds of negative ways of dealing with us, then they are not abiding by the values that we have as a people. Which is why I think we need this forum. We need forums like Nkátá, and even more than this, to have some of these conversations in an open way. Another core Igbo value is entrepreneurialism, or what Professor Luno called in his 1982 book, achievementalism. I will call it Uchu in Igbo. Some young ones amongst us might recognize aspects of it in Flavor's recent hit, Doings. Do we know Doings? Okay. But what Doings does is portray the fruits of hard work and entrepreneurship. It does not speak particularly to the hard work that leads to the fruits that we have called levels and doings. We have always valued achievement. You look at all our books, if you look at Things Fall Apart, which is celebrated all over the world, we have always valued achievement. Today we can call it double silencer and double condenser, but we have always valued achievement. People who don't know us will call us lovers of money, but really it is that one must work hard and be an achiever. Our titles, especially in days of old, were based on this, on merit, on being able to show that you could go above and beyond. With bands and bands of yam to show for it. Eventually, we moved to Akwụkwọ. Igbo saw in time that Akwụkwọ education, formal education, was an opener of doors. One day I can come back to this forum and we can debate what the content of education should be. But let me keep it simple for today and say that whatever we understood as education, we have worked hard at this. I am a living witness to that. My great uncle, Cheluchi Onyemelukwe, sent my father to school, to DMJS, and our family, including myself and my children, the honor bearers of Umuahia, continue to testify. Entrepreneurship is also about business at different levels, from the markets in our neighborhoods to the businesses that lead to a presence on Forbes lists. More and more, we must speak to the need to understand hard work, entrepreneurship, climbing to the heights of careers in different spaces, to digital inclusion that opens doors of technology. The movies that we have made about Ogwego and so on may be entertaining on one level, but they do not truly reflect the values of entrepreneurship and achievementalism that we hold dear as Igbo. We must reflect again, we must speak again about Uchu, which is employed in many endeavors and which will bring us untainted glory and not abomination. It is this spirit of entrepreneurialism that gave us the apprenticeship system that is now a case study at the Harvard Business School. Igba boy was, as those of old enough in the room would recognize, the way some of our communities became hotbeds of success. Some have called it the secret of our success, but certain principles were honored. Honesty on the part of both Oga and Nwaboy. Both knew the terms and kept to them. These days, we hear of people who take young boys away for years only to dismiss them or even have them arrested at the point of settlement. We hear of young boys who deprive their masters of their assets, and yet we forget that this is a system that is tried and tested and that has worked for us. Perhaps we now need some tweaking of the conditions of Iwabo, introduce more formalization with contracts and such instruments. But the bottom line is that we need to go back to the basics in terms of our values, which are time-tested and results-based. We can also ask our business schools to help us institutionalize the system, lending Igbo values and success to the world. If we recognize the values of entrepreneurialism and achievementalism as core Igbo values, we must worry. Let me not say fear. Anything, by whatever name called, that threatens our productivity. We survive the aftermath of war by figuring out ways to be productive, to be entrepreneurial, to achieve. When we begin to devise strategies for dealing with problems, including political problems that affect our productivity, that affect our education, our means of livelihood, our resources, our communities as the fertile grounds for investments that they could be, then we must at a minimum, think and think again. Because this goes against our core values as Igbo that we maintain against colonialists, that we have maintained in the face of all odds, and even against the challenges of war. While recognizing the spirit of Uchu and the spirit of republicanism and independent thought, it is critical that we recognize the value of communalism. Igbo have always been a communal people, which is why Nkátá, in every family will be where they will meet. As a communal people, there are certain things that we have always done. We have always recognized the place of communal interest. Recognized it as primary and in many cases placed it above individual interest. As communal people, there are certain things that we considered as ochu, abomination in the past. If you go and look at those things, these were things that were considered to affect the community in adverse ways. When I hear, for instance, of Igbo people threatening to kill other Igbo people because of differences in ideology, or for political differences, I realize that our community values have been jettisoned. When I hear of Igbo people taking pictures and videos of persons who have been hurt or killed for the purposes of sharing on social media, I realize that our communal values have been set aside. Our communalism provides for us a framework to recognize the need to care for one another and provides a balance to our other value of achievementalism, so that for you to be truly successful as an Igbo woman or Igbo man, you should bring the success home. For the success to have the capacity to be brought home, it cannot be abominable. So that we say, Eziafa Kiego. We also say, Omemwoji konyo himma. The person who only makes a contribution when they can afford it is better than a thief. Your good name in your community is better than money. So that all we hear of Yahoo, Ogwego, and all the rest of it, which only used to be the stuff of Nollywood movies, are completely against our values as Igbo. Communalism also balances out achievementalism in this way. If you are an Igbo elite, and I use that term very broadly, you are truly successful only when you touch your community. The same with wealth, which is why we say Akulueno. Akulueno was the reason why in the past communities came together to send young people to school with scholarships, and in some communities, this is how they bred a critical mass of educated people. The well-to-do made contributions to ensure that the brilliant ones who could have ended up dropping out for lack of funds went to Government College Umuahia, to DMJS Onitsha, to CKC, and the rest of them. Akulueno is wider than just wealth getting home. Stretched to its logical conclusions, we must think then of how we can bring our assets, whatever they may be, to bear on the well-being of Ndibo. Our political class must have the interests of Ndibo at heart, locally and nationally. Self-interest alone is counter to core Igbo values. To carry the identity of Onyibo, you cannot walk in political corridors and think only of yourself. You cannot be interested in political office at whatever level with no interest in raising your community and making life more bearable for members of your community. For the rest of us, we must think of these things as we look to vote and support people interested in political office. We must ask, what is our position in terms of policy? What is the interest of Ndibo? What you're going to do, especially in the national sphere? We are people of remembrance, who remember who is related to whom and in what way, going back generations, and we transmitted this by oral history. We communicated our values through folklore. Anyị jasi na anyị cheta aka. Remembrance is most important. To some of us who grew up in the era when we could take the knowledge of these values for granted, if not always the practice of them, we must find ways to communicate these values again. We must remember that not everybody knows, especially our younger people. We must find effective ways to communicate these values from parents at home to their children, but also in public spaces. Social media has become a huge force in many lives, especially young lives. How can we use this to discuss these values and have meaningful conversations about them? Center for Memories has provided a platform through its various initiatives. How can we support it to become an even bigger platform so much so that all young persons look to it for a better narrative of who we are as Ndibo? Ebuchukwu is the final value that I would like to speak about, and this is the shortest. Translated loosely, it is the fear of God. I'm not about to hold a religious class, don't panic, or a Bible class. The value simply required us to be careful of what we did, of what we do, because we're accountable to God. Even in Omenani, we will say, Omefe Jidofo. Clean hands are very important. In all of these, we must choose to go above and beyond in upholding our sanctity of thought and sanctity of doing. So have we always upheld these values? The truth is that we have not. We have ignored them sometimes. And when we look at our society at different levels, our rejection of what identifies us, what marks us out as Ndibo, has not been beneficial to us. What I have sought to do in this talk is not necessarily to tell us what we don't know, because I know that we know them, some of us at least. some more than others, but to remind us of who we are. There are others striving to do this. The conveners of the Center for Memories are striving to do this on our behalf. So we must support them to see that we can pass these values that have stood the test of time, that have withstood all kinds of challenges, that have marked us out as Igbo, to thrive even in these challenging times and for generations to come. Thank you for listening. Thank you for Center for Memories and all your partners. Nyadilani.
So the Nkátá continues. We move to the Oina. But every child in school, his or her parent had a handle or something he or she was doing. In today's world, many people parents, the young man wakes up in the morning, a child, what does their parents do? So the parents of today are not laying solid foundation for tomorrow. All sorts of things. That's from home. So part of our work is in the families. Because if we don't raise the standards from home, what is difficult for the schools to manage those children? Unfortunately, this is why in the late 80s to 90s, when we were what I would call the big bang, when the military promoted some kind of guys, especially Poland. I remember in 1999, the thing this year is institutionalized. Because in 1999, or before 1999, many decent people had made several efforts in politics, but they didn't succeed. In 1999, many of those decent people became one. They didn't see 1999 as something that was going to that transition. So most politics, we are not our best at that time. And now over time, take it to go an army of very complicated kind of presence that hasn't helped our development. So all of that as Igbo would I can participate in processes. You can have to rebuild our families, to rebuild our public institutions. And now we will lose the result of Kenya in a sustainable future. What would I tell you? Especially the young people. In our if we have discussed most times these days about the cases, like when the question of gender equality. Gender equality is a list of our problem. I would say so because in the pre-colonial Igbo culture, the Igbo culture provided the Igbo economy. And in that Igbo economy, why my economy here? What my economy here? What can be? G, go Ede, a kid for him down to me. The man that I do, able to get well, it's strictly the woman's asset wealth. Only be a why you know? I used to like to say no. But I think you're not asking to know. So the women had their role, and still have their role, both in colonial and today's world. Nobody has anything. For people to now think, no, Beijing, can't define the power that is wrong. It's absolute madness. Because all that became were disparities in wages. In Nigeria, we don't have disparity in wages. If you are a senior lecturer as a woman, the standard of senior lecturer as a woman, that of the man is equal. The only difference in wages here. In the Igbo land, the woman was highly dignified. Why are you buying a value? So let our people not waste our time debating gender, everything. which is placed in our culture and histories. So, I think the Antiquabaka and the Go, let us not do so. The future seems very challenging. And I gather to our members will be able to read back at that time.
Some of us are addressing the symptoms, but I think we need to address the illness. And I'm very happy our Professor friend here touched on that illness, and that's leadership, the ineptitude and obtuseness amongst our leaders. I'm just going to give two simple examples, and I'll hand the microphone over. I came home and went to Artisan here to buy ordinary goat, and they took me to where they would slaughter the goat. I paid all the land fees, everything, and they brought out the tire. Here in Enugu, Artisan. So I said, let me see what they are doing with the tire. I saw a heap of tires there. And the next thing, he wanted to cut the tire and put it to flame. And I said to him, what are you doing with the tire? And he said, that's what they use for roasting meat here. I said, what? And we're talking about cancer all over our world? You mean you're going to roast this goat and not with tire? She said, okay, if you don't like that, that's all that what they do for that people. But you bring 500 naira, we'll buy firewood for you. So I gave him 500 naira and he went to buy firewood. And another person came and he was roasting his own goat with the tire. And you know what hurt me? The vet people came there to collect 300 naira from us. They just collected the money and walked away and gave us their receipt. And the question I asked, does it mean that there's nobody who knows that they're using tire to roast the meat we eat in Artisan? And is it possible that the leaders in this state can do nothing about it to bring that to an end? Something happened to our secondary schools. I went to CIC. When I went to CIC, the toilets were clean. I can assure you that if we go on inspection there now, and other public schools have been taken over by government, you will see maggots inside the toilet. And the question is, what happened to our state schools? Why is the standard I enjoyed in CIC no longer there? It boils down to leadership. And unless we can do what is happening in Anambra here now, where the governor who is going out accepts that the crop of people around him, as politicians are not the best, we can offer for a state that produces the best, and does everything possible to create a platform where the likes of Soludo and my friend here, and all of them would emerge. And today we have one of them as our leaders, and I can assure you that the rest of them will assist him. If all the states in Igbo land can have leaders like we have in Anambra today, I can assure you that things will change. This is the truth. Because no matter what I'm doing at home, if the other home is not doing the same thing, we still have the problem. I went to a family and I told my children, you are not going to watch this channel. And the man said, that's the channel that the children watch. So, if I don't want my children to watch vulgar channels and it's approved in their family, isn't it dangerous for allowing my children going there? But the government at the level of authority can remove all such channels from our homes. You don't have to have a remote control to be able to stop such channels. So the truth is that if we don't do something collectively about the leadership problem, about the type of leaders we have, the problem will continue. It's as simple as that.
I didn't know that after that I would go into another exam, whether I prepared for it or not. But, and in a sense, I'm happy at some of the conversations that we're having, right? Which is what I was thinking, we'll sit down and have those conversations. And I'm really, I don't think it's, something that, like I said when I was doing my talk, I don't think it's something that one person can address, because it's something that affects us in a very holistic way. I will do what professors do, which is to say, when we say that the problem is at an individual level, we are right. And when we say it is at a leadership level, we are right. It's everything across board. And it took a while for us to get here. I tell my students, for example, when I was younger, you will always hear lecturers and other people, they'll say, it didn't used to be like this, things were always better in the past. I said, but I think I'm still young, but I'm beginning to see that some things were better in the past. There were some standards. Not everything was perfect, obviously, but there were things that were better. But I think that across board, whether we're looking, how do people become leaders? They come from somewhere. They didn't just wake up and become leaders. They've had time to go through homes and schools and other things before they presented themselves, and before other people who come from homes and other places chose them and supported them and allowed them to become leaders. So I think it's a holistic problem that has roots that are, in a sense, deeper than the conversations that we're going to have now. I think, of course, colonialism dealt us a blow that sometimes I think about it and I don't think that we have really quite come to terms with it. And after that happened, we have not healed ourselves, and we have, we continue to proceed, and we continue to, in certain ways, even do harm to ourselves, even with what we do have. So I think it's a holistic problem. I think we need to start from the ground up, and the home is one of the places, but that's not the only place. When we think about family, we think nuclear, we think wider, we think broader. All of that needs work, and I hope that we can have these conversations. We've had it in a very holistic way today. I think that maybe going forward with all the other talks, we'll pick, different segments, different aspects of society. Somebody's talking about health and safety, for example. The person you're talking to about tire, do they understand about carcinogens? Do they understand about carcinogens? They probably don't. Sorry. Okay. They probably don't. They probably think you're making their lives difficult. Can you hear me? I said the person that you're talking to about using a tire to burn the goods, do they know what you know? The potential for cancer and for all that kind of, they don't really know that. They think you're making their lives difficult instead of doing what you need to do and taking your goods away. Okay? Even the person that is coming to do the inspection, I don't like talking about education because that's a whole, we have a lot of work to do that. Even the person that is coming for inspection, you would be shocked that they are not as vast as you are in that. They're just saying it's an alternative to using these tires are, they're there. And you want us to go and start cutting firewood. In fact, somebody might even talk to you about, recycling and using wood and climate change and other things. And you are going somewhere else. And of course, I'm not saying you're wrong, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that the problem is, if we start digging it, we might not go home this night. For the people who are talking about gender equality, something that I'm very passionate about. So I try to be very measured about it when I talk in public. When you come to my house, it's a different ballgame. It's a free-for-all. I think that gender equality is important. And I think that if you think about our ancestors, our foremothers and our forefathers, that they probably had a much more progressive stance on it than we do today. I know for sure that growing up with not just my father, my uncles, other people, that they are surprised about some things that young men come up with today. That I'm just being honest, okay? They understood the economies that we just talked about. But I do work in domestic violence, I can tell you. And the funny thing is that most of our issues are with Igbo people. So, you will hear a man say, no, nobody still. But that's not, that knowledge, that's what I'm saying, that knowledge, there's a knowledge gap. There's a knowledge gap there. Many of us that are older, we know how respected our mothers were. But I can tell you, people will come to my office, they will tell me their husbands say, in the 21st century. And we're also expected to keep quiet and say, well, it's your home, do it like that. Now, it's not just your home. There are other people that will come and put their mouth because of who and everyone. Okay, what? So I don't want to kind of get into a whole, but I think, of course, culture evolves, sometimes in progressive ways, sometimes in retrogressive ways. We need to pick what is good, what I've distilled. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I talked about communalism. Communalism is the value under which we said, leprosy, for example, it's the same value that also allowed us to say, when one has twins, the twins should be cast off. You need to understand how the values came about. The value is the value. The value is good by itself, right? But they're looking at those things are not, without the education and the science or whatever that we have now, that incomplete knowledge tells you this is odd. And I'm like here. The twins, for example. Therefore, it will affect everybody in the community. It's not that we want to be mean. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, if we evolve that to say, communalism is still good, it's still about protecting us. What does that mean for us today? I don't want to get into another lecture. But I'm saying that it's more, a little bit more complex. Some of these values are a little bit more complex. But what surprises me is that when I talk to younger people, they are not as knowledgeable about this at all. Rather say how it should apply. And that's a conversation that I believe that people that are even much older than myself need to start having, and we need to link them up, and this is such a good platform to do that. We need to have that conversation one-on-one. To your question about gender equality, I hope I've touched on it a little bit. But, for men will always say, when I enter rooms, they will always say this, we love women, we don't have these issues. But again, you need to do what? You need to see from the perspective of somebody else. I'm doing it always surprises me, I'm doing an international consultancy now with an entity in the Gambia looking at doing their gender country profile. I did the same gender country profile for Nigeria, and I was so shocked at how the difference between their levels of violence and our own. And again, like I say, it's still something that we need to deal with. And the value set is capable of dealing with it. We may have disagreements here and there, but we will make it work. We can use those values in a progressive way. But if we don't even know them, we can't use them. That's where I'm coming from. I think also, like I said, it's across board. It's from top to bottom and from ground up. I wish I could be a teacher and just say to the class, so what do you think? I don't know. I think that young people should tell us. Sometimes I'm still young, but you know what I mean. How can we meet you? How can we engage you more? I think, I don't know, that's a conversation that I plan to have with Nan. I think digital platforms and even using those things that they love as an incentive I think that could play a role, you know, and use that to engage them and to entice them. I also think that sometimes we imagine that there are no young people that are interested, and that's, you know, you know, with this little celebrity status that I got with Nigeria Prize for Literature, I know that there are young people that are hungry for what we can give them. We just need to engage them a little bit more, and then have them, you know this sort of thing, the peer learning thing. Have them engage their mates as well.
And each of them actually said was a nature. But the reality on ground is that it's our desire, I think, of other can so well. But anyone, no one can struggle with you. How we can and how I asked my hand about so I can get to the put anyone to go
See you impressed. Oh Lord.
I find your lecture very interesting because the topic by definition was speaking to identity. And I was looking forward to the perspective of identity you will come from. And came from values, which means that our values speak to our
identity. I agree.
And you listed some of them. Again, you qualified your topic by talking about the challenging times. So we know the times you're talking about. Now, from the values you have identified in these challenging times to establish our identity, or in your words, to reaffirm our identity, which ones do you think is most imperative or most at risk? And what, in your view, do you think we can do to mitigate or cause correct? Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
We're really proud of you for what you've done and what you're doing. And let me just at least, before I say celebration.
Thank you.
Huge inspiration that you've been us. So thank you very much. Now, I found this conversation really exciting. I'm a bit obvious. You know, because increasingly you're hearing people, Igbo people, question the draw of the narrative that was handed down to us about what our culture is. I'm told I'm not supposed to maybe acknowledge my ancestors because I'm a Christian, but I can acknowledge the sense. You know, the whole lot of things about back in the days, and as a people when you survive they can more. You begin to absorb everything they tell you, and that is the critical damage that was on the side of Africa and Igbo people. The whole idea that our culture, our value system is a soft part to what the Westerners propagate. And that is within God's ambition, in my view. But increasingly, when we go to events, young people, old people are beginning to challenge those narratives. And that is, it goes to the core of what you said about how being able to understand ourselves and know where we're coming from. To know that implicit in our value system is respect for women. The Ummah is the most powerful institution in the traditional Igbo. To know that, just like you mentioned, that disparity in wages is a It's alien to people. They don't know what they are. And all of these important values are communalism. On the other hand, people make the joke that we don't go to shrinks in this part of the world. It's because they are class shrink. That's what we are about. People come to our house and tell their father where they are together, and you have to listen and find a solution. It becomes your problem. And everything about what we were talking about communality, there is no language in the language that speaks about it. But every Igbo adage is about people. And the most amazing one for me is that if you very well, one of the other means that we need each other. And so we have to begin to reinforce those values. And forget all this nonsense about this, all this Western thing about my right, selfishness, my truth. You've got notions that is not rooted in your community. Without your community, you have no identity. That's the truth. And if we begin to reflect the narrative, perhaps our young men will see no need to go to the door or look to women to have a Christianity. Our young men will go naked on the street for them to get money. In my village, there is no homeless person. And in your village, there are no homeless people. If you don't have a house, you have your own house. It can't be one. What has happened to all those values? Why have we become more Western than Westerners? Why are we absorbing all the madness of the West without the hard work of the West? And I thank you for making that point. If we're going to find ourselves, all we need to go back and be as Igbo as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So 50% keyboard. So I think this more like will be in response to what Mr. Nana my senior here, and everyone basically has said, it just feels like there's a generation that failed to hand over the right things, narrative, and everything to the next. Basically, it just feels like as Nigeria was growing from the 20s to the 30s, just like in politics, it just feels like at the point, they just decided, let's keep this to ourselves. And now, everybody's complaining and asking. So, the women and the men that were born in the 70s and maybe the late 60s are the ones that we are seeing. And when you look at their stories, you find that they actually, on their own, chose to make things happen for themselves. So, they are actually the ones working it out. Instead of the days we heard stories of some government man or some rich man gathering some people and sending them to the UK to study, and gathering some. All of those things died because I come from a large family where maybe I should be here today, but maybe I should have a better story. But it comes to our point. Whenever I hear my uncles tell the stories of how their own fathers did to them, and I look at them, they are proudly saying these things, and it's supposed to make a novel or what? So the question is, we need to start answering the question. First, what generation was that? I was in a festival, a literary festival, where Patrick Doyle and some other people, the showing cast, accepted that they took something and failed to hand over to the next generation. They accepted it. I'm saying it on TV, or whoever is watching can bear me with. It is just what it is. So the question now is, how do we now start understanding that the Igbo as a culture, people, that we all had and grew on oral tradition. We were told they had been handed down. And of course, with time, it was being watered down. But, it was there. Is there something that we can hold on to? As a matter of fact, apart from church and maybe folklore, a little bit of it, I'm not sure I truly know some of the things that I should know, except the ones I started digging out myself. So, I think asking for mentorship, and that's something that we cannot ask for enough, because it is not existing anywhere. It is dead. It is dead. Some people will even tell you that Arab personal phone. I know it has happened. There's someone in I'm in the University of Nigeria, and there's this professor's son that was recently picked up for robbery. This is one of the brilliant boys I knew growing up. But how did it change? How did it change? Because the father and the mother were busy financially vulnerable. They forgot that they're supposed to hand over that thing that they got themselves. Now everybody's nobody can even help. Like it's taking his own classmates to gather themselves together to do what? To help him. So the question is, are we really saying that we are going to breathe? Are we not supposed to start thinking of where this problem started? And then even go back and ask questions. A lot of them are going. They're in their 90s now, and they're dying off. We need to go and ask questions. What did you pass on to the generation that they haven't given to us? I think it's just that question. We should all start thinking beyond speaking good English and speaking Igbo. I don't think I want to speak Igbo. So say Igbo. We need to, while we're doing that, let's just look at the core, the issue at hand. We are not learning from nobody. So if we are never going to remain at the club, that is what he saw. Who is informing them? Who is teaching us?
Our parents and grandparents, they taught about greatness and legacy. Generational kind of is survival. That's the kind margin of difference when you're thinking about greatness. The things on a man, one year they keep us playing, there's a huge difference between a man who is thinking about survival. Here, many people go survival. That is why only narrow bread in the 60s, the son probably took over from him. Only narrow bread today, the son is seeing the bread as not enough profit to sustain him and family. But child not just look at the bread. So it's survival instinct. Times are changing, things are moving fast. The key thing about, I think we're part of the discussion. Let us be part of the solution. Things look complex, but there is progress. I make progress. The young people are also very curious to understand what to be done. So it's not all that hopeless. Nkátá is very rich, and I believe that there are a lot of can take over from this outing. But the most important thing, every opportunity to participate in community service, participate. You cannot change much of a system from outside. You do better when you are part of the process. Don't worry about joining and not succeeding. Most people who have succeeded in life try 2, 3, 4 times. One time walking in the bar, and they say, he went out for election. He didn't lose. The point is that probably people didn't understand his message as they thought to have done that. Subsequently, he lost the try. And in your community, in your office, whatever you have, be part of the process. Join in the conversation. Don't keep quiet. Him all the time would be the difference between where we are and where we're supposed to be.
Important gems that were coming through. And I think in a sense, even in asking our questions, we're also answering them. There are so many things that are not working out. I'll answer Nana's question more directly, which is the answer is communalism. That's the question. That's the value that is being depleted, because communalism is really the mother lode, and every other thing is sort of part of it. So when you talk about resilience, for example, it's resilience to do what? To ensure that the community continues and thrives. When people fight over differences, I've been trying to, I've been trying to be politically correct and refuse some things for starting from one day. We are not thinking of ourselves. We're not thinking of ourselves in a holistic way. We are the people that, in the past, we will sacrifice one person for the community to stay. So we need to ask ourselves those core questions. And, as I'm sitting here, one of the things I'm really thinking is, individually, including myself, what can I do? How can I be a purveyor? How can I be a purveyor for deepening the knowledge, for closing the knowledge gap, and so on and so forth? Some of the questions we've had around in the past, is a bit more complex than that, than we can get into here. But people have touched on different aspects of it. For example, if people are merely surviving, they cannot take on their brother's children. There is that. There's also the fact that we have more and more become individualistic, and I think even the families that we thought were doing really well, we became more nuclear than used to be the case, for sure. Some of these things are inexorable and in a sense inevitable. But the question is, as human beings, even though things will always change, the idea is that we're always struggling. We're always struggling to keep what is good. To keep what is good, to keep it, and, even as we're changing with the times, to retain the core of what is good. And I think that's what I really wanted to get to with my lecture. I think there is so much more in this that we need to dig. I take the point about the Twitter chats and so on. And I think that the center will continue, I think, to reach out to young people to figure out how do we even get a teacher chat going, for example? How do we make it interesting? And other ideas around how to engage young people. So I think, thank you very much. In fact, I almost said we had finished, sir, when you rounded up with that. There is nobody that is living here not a little bit more enlightened, and I don't mean just from my speech, I mean from this rubbing of minds, from even hearing young people, express themselves very passionately. So hopefully it will continue to widen. As I'm sitting here and as each of us is sitting, I think that we should be thinking of ways to continue to reach out. And I'm going to, in closing, I don't think there's anything else that we're saying, I'm going to challenge Chifetiaba to continue to, you had some really, really interesting engagements on social media, sharing really important things that we need to hear. And I think that those of us who have the capacity to do so, Mr. Ilo, right? Yes, I knew it was you. We need to engage more. So we need to be more intentional about putting out a different narrative out there. I think that's where I'm going to end. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. All right.
I just want to recognize a few dignitaries that walked in while we were on. The immediate past chairman of Enugu Sports Club, Chief Onyemelukwe. Thank you very much. In your time, we really, really received high level of cooperation and partnership with you in this program, and we will remain eternally grateful to you for the support and the partnership. Thank you. We also have here in our midst Dr. David Ugunta, the Honorable Commissioner for Budget and Plan in Enugu State. Thank you for joining us. And for those who didn't know, Professor Bernard Dodo, who is here, was the Secretary to the State Government of Ebonyi State. Prof, thank you for your insights to share here. And then, last but not the least, I hope he's still here, one of our previous speakers, Chinenye Mbauzugu. He was here, I don't know if he stepped out, he was sitting down there, he sneaked in and he probably has sneaked out. So thank you so much, Chinenye. I'll now invite my colleague, a member of the board of the Center for Memories. You've heard from him earlier, so he will have his own task to perform now to give us the vote of thanks. My brother, Jude Udo Ilo.
Good evening, once again. Okay, let me first of all start by again thanking our distinguished speaker this evening, Ada Ndibojemono. Thank you so much for a very, 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 very exciting conversation. At some point in the conversation, it was obvious people didn't want to go. Bayana the debate, Bayana the conversation, and that happened because of the provocative points you made. It's given us a lot to think about, even as the Center for Memories, as in the Igbo and as individuals. We'll go back asking ourselves that question, am I projecting my Igbo identity? Am I respecting my Igbo identity? I guess that's the question we have to ask ourselves going forward. And to all of you, the people online, across different time zones all over the world, those of you seated here in the room, I thank you so much for your patience, for your participation, for being part of this
collective effort to reclaim and save our history, to save our values, to ensure that we find again our pride of place in the scheme of things. So, what the impact that all of us understand the mutuality of our Igbo connection. And we cannot do it alone, and we can't stand if all of us are not standing. As long as there is somebody in this community who cannot stand on their feet, we are all crawling. And so let us, live here with that energized determination to be our brother's keeper, to hold each other's hands, because that is who we are. The point of the conversation today is Ahamefuna. And Afani is interwoven with our values, is interwoven with our culture. And our culture is about being our brother's keepers. And so for our name, then we have to watch out for each other. And it is really, really important in this time and age. The other thing I want to also mention is that the Center for Memories over the years has played the role of being a rallying ground for this kind of intellectual conversation and a platform for us to interrogate a number of issues affecting us as a people. We need your support. We need your support. The young people here volunteer at the center. Go in there once in a while and help us. We appreciate you coming, but you can imagine the enormous amount of work that went into having this event. So it's not a matter of ego. We don't really need your money as a young person. Just make yourself available, because if you're there, you're learning and you're helping. Here, a crusade kind of a crusade of self-awareness, a crusade of self-realization as a people. And if it's going to succeed, we all have to be part of it. And, for the people who can actually afford some money, please make whatever little contribution you can. If of it's here, hero, opening like 33 bottles every weekend, you may one. You web in the ego in a month, web in the ego in a year. It comes to something. Imagine if every Igbo young adult gives 1,000 naira to the center. We are counting like 6 million people. You know what that means? The center is housed in a warehouse. About that day in the afternoon, heat, Maggie, hug, and Maggie. And we're struggling. So please, for our brothers and sisters online, let us, this is the whole thing about Achuluna. Let us think home and make this place a hub of Igbo history, a hub of Igbo resilience, a hub of Igbo education. Finally, when Prof was speaking, she talked about the excellent home where she grew up, about the values the parents kept instilling in her, reminding her where she came from. And I find it really exciting that dude Naboja and call your names. It's mind. I'm just trying to play the picture in my head. And we are very fortunate that the woman who made Prof possible is here in our midst. So ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to rise and give her a round of applause? Mommy, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the excellent work you've done. Thank you for sharing her with us. and thank you for being a quintessential Igbo mother. We thank you.